July 17th, 1944. The bocage country of Normandy, France. Dawn's grey light filters through the hedgerows like smoke from a dying fire, but the real haze comes from the relentless barrage that's been pounding the 29th Infantry Division's positions since midnight. You can feel it in your bones. The ground trembles under the impact of 88mm shells from the German 352nd Infantry Division, each explosion ripping through the earth like a thunderclap from hell. Sergeant Elias Eli Harlan crouches in a shallow foxhole, his M1 Garand clutched tight, mud caking his fatigues. The air stinks of cordite and wet soil, and the chatter of his squad's radios crackles with urgency. "Incoming! Take cover!" Eli wipes rain from his eyes, peering over the lip of the hole. The hedgerows, those cursed impenetrable walls of tangled bushes and ancient earth banks, offer some protection, but not enough. The Germans have zeroed in on their sector near St. Lo, their artillery spotters hidden in the ruins of farmhouses, calling down fire with deadly precision. Another shell whistles overhead, detonating 50 yards away, showering the hole with shrapnel that pings off Eli's helmet like angry hornets. Private Tommy Ruiz, barely 20, presses his face into the mud beside him, whispering a prayer in Spanish. "Madre de Dios, make it stop." Captain Harlan, Eli to his men, though rank demands respect, bites back a curse. He's led this platoon through the D-Day beaches and the brutal push inland. But this is different. The bocage turns every advance into a slaughterhouse. Tanks can't maneuver, infantry gets pinned, and the Kraut's big guns turn the fields into craters. Intelligence reports from the 2nd Armored Division nearby confirm it. The enemy has emplaced their 105mm howitzers in elevated positions, using spotter planes like the Fiesler Storch to direct fire. One wrong move, and your whole line evaporates. "Ruiz, stay low," Eli growls, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. He grabs the field phone, cranking it furiously. The line hisses with static before connecting to Battalion HQ. "This is Bravo 3 requesting counter-battery fire. They're walking it right onto us." The response is a crackle of frustration. Ammo low, priorities shifted to the push on Caen. Eli slams the receiver down, his mind racing. They've tried everything, smoke pots from the engineers, but the wind shifts and the Germans just adjust. Direct assaults, suicide, flanking, the hedges block every path. Across the line, in a command post dug into an abandoned barn, Lieutenant Colonel Harlan's brother, wait, no, that's coincidence. Eli's just a sergeant with a common name. Major Thomas Reed pores over a soggy map under the flicker of a lantern. Reed's the Battalion S3 operations officer, a West Point grad with a reputation for outthinking the enemy. His aides huddle around, the room thick with cigarette smoke and the distant rumble of thunder. Or is that more shells? "The 352nd has us bracketed," Reed says, tracing a finger along the grid lines. "Their fire's too accurate. We lose another company, and the whole flank collapses before the Brits link up." One of his staff, a wiry signals lieutenant named Carver, chimes in. "Sir, what about the smoke screens? We used them at Omaha, but here—" Reed shakes his head. Standard issue smoke grenades from the M1 dispensers create puffs, not walls. The Germans spot through them with their Zeiss binoculars, and the wind scatters it like confetti. But Carver's got an idea brewing, something half-baked from a training manual he'd skimmed back in England. What if we make it stupid simple? Not just smoke, combine it with something to blind their spotters entirely. Eli's platoon holds the line as the barrage intensifies. A shell lands close enough to flip dirt into their faces, and Ruiz yelps as a fragment grazes his arm. Eli binds it quickly with a strip from his first aid kit, his hands steady from too many such moments. "Hang in there, kid. We're not dying in this mud." But doubt creeps in. The company's down to 60 effectives from 100, and the wounded are piling up in the aid station. Screams echoing over the radio. Eli thinks of his wife back in Ohio, the letters he hasn't sent. One more push, they said. One more. Back at HQ, Reed leans forward, eyes narrowing. Talk to me, Carver. The lieutenant sketches it on the map. Use the Division Surplus 4, 2-inch chemical mortars, not for gas, but loaded with WP, white phosphorus, the stuff that burns hot and creates dense, clinging smoke. But the trick, fire it not at the enemy lines, but high angle, right over their own positions, timed with the wind to drift back toward the German spotters. It's dumb, sir, like throwing sand in their eyes. But if we saturate the air, their observers go blind. No spot, no fire. Reed pauses, the weight of command pressing down. It's unorthodox, risky. WP can drift wrong and hit friendlies. But with the 29th pinned and Patton's Third Army breathing down their necks for a breakthrough, desperate times call for stupid ideas. He nods. Get the mortars from the 83rd Chemical Battalion. Coordinate with Eli Harlan's platoon. They're in the hottest spot. Tell them to hold for 10 minutes. The order ripples out via radio. A burst of Morse code from the SCR 300 backpack sets. Eli's radio operator, Corporal Lena Voss, a rare woman in signals, tough as nails, decodes it. Sergeant, incoming smoke support. Something new. Hold position. Eli's heart pounds. Hold? Under this? But he rallies his men, voices low and urgent, eyes sharp, rifles ready. This might just be our ticket out. And as the first mortar rounds arc skyward from a concealed battery half a mile back, the air fills with a whoosh like a giant sighing. The shells burst overhead, not with explosion, but a blooming cloud of white-hot fog that spreads like a shroud. It drifts, heavy and acrid, blotting out the horizon. Eli squints into it, the world turning ghostly. And then, silence. The German guns fall quiet, one by one. But how long will it last? In the swirling haze, unseen eyes might still be watching. If you're hooked on these forgotten corners of the war, hit that subscribe button for more. Word count, 872. The white phosphorus clouds hung low over the bocage like a biblical plague, twisting in the damp Normandy wind and turning the battlefield into a fever dream. Sergeant Eli Harlan blinked against the stinging haze, his eyes watering as the acrid bite of burning WP filled his nostrils, sharper than any tear gas he'd endured in training. The silence from the German guns was eerie, broken only by the drip of rain from the hedgerows and the muffled coughs of his squad. No more whistles of incoming shells, no earth-shaking booms, just this unnatural quiet. As if the war itself had paused to catch its breath. "Move up, slow and quiet," Eli whispered, his voice hoarse from the smoke. He waved his men forward from the foxhole, their boots sucking in the mud as they crept along the base of an ancient earth bank, M1 carbines at the ready. Private Tommy Ruiz, his arm bandaged but functional, stuck close, his face pale under the grime. "Feels wrong, Sarge. Like they're waiting." Eli nodded, scanning the white veil ahead. The trick had worked, for now. The 83rd Chemical Battalion's 4 2-inch mortars had lobbed round after round of M110 WP shells high into the sky, bursting at 2 feet to rain down a persistent fog that clung to everything. It wasn't just smoke, it burned through optics, seared skin on exposed spotters, and turned the Germans' feaseless Storch observation planes into blind birds circling uselessly overhead. Back at the battalion command post, Major Thomas Reed wiped sweat from his brow, the lantern's glow casting long shadows on the barn's hay-strewn floor. The radio operator's SCR 536 handset crackled with reports. "Bravo 3 advancing, no fire." Reed allowed himself a grim smile, but it faded quick. Lieutenant Carver, the signals whiz who'd pitched the idea, hovered nearby, sketching adjustments on a grease pencil. "It's holding, sir, but the wind's shifting east. If it drifts back on us." Reed cut him off with a raised hand. Then we adapt. Get word to the 29th Artillery, Battery A, 224th Field Artillery Battalion. Have them lay down a creeping barrage behind the smoke curtain. We push while the Krauts are fumbling. The plan rippled out like a stone in a pond. Eli's platoon, part of Company B, 116th Infantry Regiment, edged forward into the haze, the world reduced to ghostly outlines. The jagged silhouettes of bombed-out barns, the twisted hulks of a knocked-out Sherman tank from yesterday's failed probe. You could hear it now, the low growl of idling engines from the 2nd Armoured Division's M4A1 Shermans, waiting for the signal to punch through. Eli's heart hammered as they crested a low rise, the smoke thinning just enough to reveal a German machine gun nest, an MG-42 chattering blindly into the fog. Bullets whined past, stitching the air like angry bees, but uncoordinated, wild. Flank it. Eli barked, dropping to a knee and squeezing off a burst from his Thompson submachine gun. The 45 slugs tore into the emplacement, a nest of sandbags manned by 3 Wehrmacht soldiers from the 352nd, their grey uniforms blending with the mist. Ruiz and the others laid down suppressing fire with their Garands, the sharp cracks echoing oddly in the muffled world. One German bolted, only to catch a round in the leg and crumple, his screams lost in the haze. Eli advanced, kicking aside a discarded MP-40, and lobbed a fragmentation grenade from his belt. The blast shredded the position, silencing it for good. But victory tasted like ash. As the platoon consolidated, a new sound pierced the quiet, the sputter of a motorcycle engine cutting through the smoke from the east. Eli signaled his men down, pressing into the undergrowth. It was a German dispatch rider, a lone figure in a sidecar rig, probably from the 352nd's headquarters near Isigny, racing to relay what little they could see. The bike swerved, its rider shouting into a field radio. But the WP had done its work, his voice cracked with panic, words garbled by the interference of the burning particles. Eli raised his rifle, sighting through the iron sights, but held fire. Let him go. Better to let confusion spread. At HQ, Reed's map table grew cluttered with fresh overlays. Reports flooded in. The smoke screen had stretched a mile wide, blinding spotters from the 17th Fallschirmjäger Regiment who'd been calling in fire from elevated church steeples. Their 105mm Lef H-18 howitzers, usually so precise, now lobbed shells haphazardly, some landing on their own lines in the panic. Casualties among the German observers were mounting, burns from the phosphorus, eyes swollen shut, forcing them to fall back on outdated maps. But Reed knew it wouldn't last forever. Wind patterns from the morning forecast showed a shift by noon, and the 352nd had Nebelwerfer rocket launchers that could saturate the area regardless. "Push the armor," Reed ordered into the field phone, his voice steady, but edged with urgency. "Tell Colonel Stanton to commit the 747th Tank Battalion. Use the smoke as cover for the breach." The line hummed with acknowledgement, and soon the ground vibrated anew, not with enemy fire, but the rumble of treads. Shermans rolled forward, their 75mm guns swiveling, dozer blades shoving aside hedgerows like tin cans. Eli's platoon linked up with a tank from the 747th, Lieutenant Hargrove's EZ-8, its long 76mm barrel probing the fog. "Hop on, infantry!" Hargrove yelled from the turret, his face smeared with oil. Eli's men clambered aboard, clinging to the hull as the tank lurched ahead, blasting through a wall of brambles. The advance gained momentum, platoons from the 115th Infantry joining the fray, their bayonets fixed for close-quarters work. In the swirling white, skirmishes erupted, brief, brutal clashes with SS Panzergrenadiers who'd infiltrated the lines. Eli fired from the tank's side, dropping a shadowy figure with a Schmeisser, but not before a Panzerfaust rocket streaked past, glancing off the Sherman's armor with a shower of sparks. The blast wave knocked Ruiz off, and Eli jumped down, dragging him back amid the chaos. "Stay with me!" Blood trickled from a gash on Ruiz's forehead, but his eyes burned with resolve. Deeper into the bocage, the smoke began to thin, patches of clarity revealing the German rear echelons in disarray. Abandoned Pack 40 anti-tank guns sat cold, their crews fleeing on foot. But then a low drone cut through. Ju-87 Stukas diving from the clouds, their Jericho sirens wailing like banshees. The pilots, flying low to pierce the haze, dropped 500-pound bombs that walked the line, explosions blooming orange through the white. One hit near Hargrove's tank, flipping a half-track and sending shrapnel whistling. Eli shielded Ruiz as dirt rained down, the world shaking. Reed heard the reports, his fist clenching. The Luftwaffe's intervention was the wild card. The smoke blinded ground spotters, but not the skies entirely. "Redirect the chem mortars, double the WP barrage," he shouted. More shells arced in, thickening the veil just as the Stukas pulled up, their bombs falling wide. The push stalled, men hunkered in the renewed fog, breaths ragged. Eli peered into the murk, the acrid taste lingering on his tongue. The trick had bought them time, turned the tide, but the Germans were adapting, shifting spotters, calling reserves. How much longer before the wind betrayed them all? In the distance, the faint crackle of renewed artillery whispered a warning. The Normandy wind picked up, fickle as a traitor's promise, tugging at the edges of the white phosphorus shroud and thinning it in patches like a veil torn by impatient hands. Sergeant Eli Harlan clung to the side of Lieutenant Hargrove's Sherman Easy 8, the tank's engine growling low as it churned through the muck. Its wide tracks chewing up the bocage lanes. The acrid tang of WP still burned in his throat, mixing with the metallic bite of gunpowder from the earlier skirmish. Ruiz groaned beside him, pressing a bloody rag to his forehead, but his grip on the tank's sponson was ironclad. "Sarge, you think this fog's gonna hold? Feels like the whole damn world's closing in." Eli didn't answer right away, his eyes scanning the hazy silhouettes ahead. Ruined stone walls, half swallowed by ivy, the skeletal remains of a windmill that had taken a direct hit days ago. The 747th Tank Battalion's column snaked behind them, a dozen M4A3s rumbling in echelon, their 50 cal machine guns manned by tense gunners from the 41st Armored Infantry. The smoke trick had silenced the 352nd's heavy artillery for what felt like an eternity, but the Stuka dive had been a rude reminder. The Luftwaffe didn't need eyes on the ground to sow hell. Those Junkers pilots, vectored by radio from forward air controllers, had nearly broken the advance before the chem mortars thickened the air again. From the battalion command post, Major Thomas Reed hunched over the field radio, the barn's walls vibrating with the distant thump of outgoing fire. Lieutenant Carver paced, his boots kicking up straw, while the signals team monitored the SCR-284 sets for updates. "Read to all units. Maintain the screen. 83rd Chem. Saturate sectors. Grid Yankee 4 through Zulu 2. Infantry. Exploit the breach." Reed's voice cut through the static. Calm, but laced with the edge of a man who'd gambled everything on a half-mad idea. The white phosphorus wasn't just blinding spotters. It was psychologically unhinging the Germans. Reports trickled in of Wehrmacht observers abandoning posts, their faces blistered, radios abandoned mid-transmission. The 17th Fallschirmjäger, elite paratroopers who'd held the line at Carentan, were pulling back, their Lef-H-18 howitzers firing blind into the void. Eli's tank lurched over a crater, jolting him as shrapnel from the Stuka bombs pinged off the hull like hail on tin. Hargrove's voice boomed from the turret. "Eyes open, doughboys. Intel says Krautpanzers might be lurking. 352nd's got a company of Panzer FEs dug in near the crossroads." Eli nodded, signaling his platoon to fan out on foot alongside the armor. The smoke swirled around them, turning the advance into a spectral dance. You could almost feel the bocage breathing, the ancient hedges whispering secrets of battles long forgotten. Private Ruiz stuck close, his M1 Garand slung low, while Corporal Voss, the radio op, trailed with her backpack set humming faintly. They pushed on, the column gaining yards with every hedgerow breached. A sudden burst of fire erupted from the mist, a German MG-42, water-cooled and furious, spitting 200 rounds a minute from a concealed pillbox. Tracers arced wildly, the smoke distorting their paths into erratic fireflies. Eli dove behind the Sherman's flank, bullets ricocheting off the sloped armor. "Suppress it!" he yelled, popping up to hose the position with his Thompson. The submachine gun bucked in his hands, 45 ACP rounds chewing through the sandbagged slit. Hargrove traversed the turret, the 76mm barking a high explosive shell that turned the nest into a fireball, flames licking through the white haze. But the Germans weren't done. From the east, the screech of Nebelwerfer rockets, those devilish screaming mimes, tore through the air, unguided but devastating in volume. The 15cm NBW-41 launchers, emplaced by the 352nd Artillery Regiment, didn't need spotters. They saturated the grid on pre-plotted coordinates. 6 tubes per launcher belched 36 rockets in seconds, the warheads detonating in a chain of blasts that shredded the earth 50 yards ahead. One clipped a trailing half-track from the 41st Infantry, flipping it and igniting the fuel. Screams cut the fog as crewmen bailed out, flames devouring the M3. "Disperse! Get off the road!" Eli roared, yanking Ruiz down. As the tank veered sharply, the platoon scattered into the hedges, the smoke now a double-edged sword, hiding them but muffling warnings. Eli crawled forward, heart pounding, until he spotted movement. A squad of Panzer Grenadiers, dismounted from half-tracks, advancing in bounds with their STG-44 assault rifles. These were tough nuts, SS-trained from the 12th Panzer Division attachments, their camouflage smocks blending with the brambles. One fired a burst, the 7.2mm rounds, snapping close, forcing Eli to roll into a ditch. Mud filled his mouth, but he came up firing, dropping the lead man with a chest hit. Back at HQ, Reed slammed a fist on the map table as the reports flooded in. Nebelwerfers bypassing the screen. "Damn it, Carver, adjust the chem barrage westward." The lieutenant scrambled to relay orders, the 4 2-inch mortars thumping anew, WP shells bursting higher to counter the wind shift. But the rockets kept coming, walking the barrage closer, forcing the 747th to halt. Hargrove's Sherman bogged in a shell hole, its crew cursing as they winched it free with a neighboring tank's cable. Eli's men traded shots in the haze, a brutal firefight at 20 yards, Garands cracking against MP40s, grenades arcing blindly. Voss's radio crackled. "Incoming P-47s from the 405th Fighter Group. Air support 5 minutes out." The sky above the smoke churned as American Thunderbolts screamed in low, their Pratt & Whitney engines roaring like avenging angels. The pilots, vectored by ground control from the 29th's Air Liaison, strafed the Nebelwerfer positions with 50 cal fire, 500-pound bombs tumbling into the launchers. Explosions ripped through the German rear, secondary blasts lighting the fog orange. The rocket fire slackened, then stopped, leaving only the acrid echo of burning phosphorus and cordite. Eli rose, wiping blood, his or Ruiz's, he couldn't tell, from his face. The path ahead cleared somewhat, the crossroads in sight, littered with wrecked Opel Blitz trucks and abandoned 88mm flak guns. His platoon linked back with the tanks, the advance resuming with renewed fury. But as they crested the rise, a deeper rumble shook the ground, not rockets, but the growl of diesel engines. Through a thinning patch of smoke, the outlines of Panzer IVs emerged, long 75mm KWK 40 barrels swinging toward them. Reed's voice crackled over the net. "Armor contact, hold the line!" The stupid trick had brought the breakthrough, but now it was down to steel on steel, man on man. Eli chambered a round, the haze parting just enough to reveal the enemy closing in. Would the smoke hold one more miracle? The bocage trembled under the weight of approaching steel. the diesel growl of the Panzer IVs cutting through the thinning white phosphorus veil like a predator's snarl. Sergeant Eli Harlan braced against the Sherman's sponson, his Thompson submachine gun hot in his grip, the last rounds from the firefight still acrid in the air. The smoke, once a savior, now betrayed them in wisps, revealing the enemy tank's squat silhouettes, 5 of them, hull down behind a shattered orchard, their long-barreled KWK-40 guns traversing slowly, searching. Mud-caked tracks churned the earth, and you could hear the clank of turret rings, the urgent shouts of German commanders in their cupolas. "Contact front, Panzers at 200 yards, Eli bellowed, his voice raw over the engine noise. Lieutenant Hargrove's Easy 8 shuddered as the loader slammed a sabot round into the 76mm breech, the gunner's optics straining through the haze. Ruiz, blood-streaked but firing, squeezed off shots from his Garand at the dismounted crewmen scurrying around the lead IOSF. Their black panzer caps bobbing. One dropped, clutching his side, but the others scattered behind the hulls, lobbing potato masher grenades that exploded short in the mud. From the battalion net, Major Reed's commands snapped like whip cracks. "All tanks, engage! Infantry! Screen the flanks! Keep those 88s quiet!" The 747th Tank Battalion's Shermans fanned out, their V8 engines revving as they hull-downed in the hedgerows, dozer blades gouging fresh cover. The first shot came from Hargrove's gun, a thunderous crack that sent the AP round streaking through the fog, slamming into the lead Panzer's mantlet with a shower of sparks. The German tank fired back almost instantly, the 75mm shell whistling past the Sherman's turret, gouging a furrow in the earth bank behind. The blast wave rocked Eli, dirt cascading over him like a grave's embrace. "Traverse left! Loader he!" Hargrove yelled, sweat beading under his helmet. The battle erupted in earnest, muzzle flashes blooming orange through the WP remnants, turning the crossroads into a cauldron. Eli's platoon dismounted in the chaos, weaving between the tanks on foot, their boots slipping in shell-slick mud. The smoke still clung in low pockets, blinding the Panzer's gunners at odd angles, forcing them to fire by dead reckoning. One Ostrich swung its barrel blindly, the shot ploughing into a friendly half-track 50 yards left, igniting it in a fireball that lit the haze hellish red. Screams pierced the din as the 41st Armored Infantry bailed out, some caught in the flames. Eli pushed forward with Ruiz and Voss, the radio op clutching her SCR 300 like a lifeline. "Cover me, I'm calling it in!" Voss dropped to a knee, keying the mic amid the roar. "This is Bravo 3 Actual, requesting bazooka teams to grid Yankee 5. Panzer's closing." The response was immediate. 2 M1A1 rocket teams from Company A, 116th, hustled up from the rear, their 2 36-inch launchers shouldered. The lead gunner, a lanky kid from Texas named Kowalski, sighted through the fog on the 2nd Panzer, its engine belching black smoke from a glancing hit. "Firing!" The rocket whooshed out, trailing fire, and struck the turret ring with a deafening clang. Flames erupted from the hatches as the crew bailed, one officer clawing at his burned face, his Luger forgotten in the panic. But the Germans pressed, their tanks advancing in a wedge, machine guns chattering from the coaxial MG-34s. Bullets snapped through the air, one grazing Eli's pack, tearing canvas and spilling rations into the muck. He returned fire, the Thompson's drum magazine emptying in a staccato burst that stitched across a Panzer's flank. Ruiz went down hard, a round clipping his leg, and Eli dragged him behind a splintered apple tree, the bark exploding under stray fire. "Stay down, Tommy. Ain't leaving you here." The private's face twisted in pain, but he nodded, fumbling for his morphine syringe. Back in the command post, Reed's face was a mask of grim focus, the map now scarred with crayon marks, tracking the melee. Lieutenant Carver monitored the air liaison channel, the room thick with cigarette haze and the tang of fear sweat. "Sir, the smoke's down to 30%. Winds pushing it south, but the 405th's P-47s are orbiting, low on fuel." Reed gripped the field phone. dialing the Chem Battalion. 83rd, one more barrage. Target the panzer positions. Make it thick. The mortars thumped in response, WP shells arcing high once more, bursting to renew the shroud just as a panzer round slammed into Hargrove's Sherman, buckling the track and halting it dead. The tank crew evacuated, Hargrove cursing as he leaped clear, his .45 pistol drawn. Eli rallied them, his voice cutting the bedlam. "Fall back to the hedges! Use the smoke!" The platoon retreated by leaps, the renewed fog swallowing them like a merciful ghost. The panzers halted, their commanders shouting adjustments, but the white veil confused their ranging. Shells fell short or long, cratering empty fields. One thunderbolt dove through a break in the clouds. Its 50 cals raking the lead Osfreich, bullets punching through the thinner side armor and igniting the ammo. The explosion lit the battlefield, a pyre sending black smoke mingling with the WP. Yet the tide teetered. A fourth panzer, its gun barking accurately through a clear patch, nailed a trailing Sherman from the 747th, the turret blowing skyward in a gout of flame. Crewmen tumbled out, some afire, their agonized cries haunting the haze. Eli fired until his Thompson clicked empty, then switched to his Garand, picking off a dismounted loader scrambling for a half-track. Voss's radio buzzed. "Bazooka teams in position, firing!" Another rocket streaked, crippling the trailing panzer's engine, leaving it smoking and immobile. Reed exhaled sharply as the report stabilized. The Germans were withdrawing, their armor too battered to press without spotter support. The stupid smoke trick, extended by sheer will, had turned the ambush into a rout. Eli slumped against the hedge, bandaging Ruiz's leg with shaking hands, the acrid WP still stinging his eyes. The crossroads lay open, littered with wreckage. A gutted Panzer IV leaking oil, abandoned MP40s in the mud, the dead staring sightless from the fog. But victory was fleeting. Scout reports crackled over the net. Reinforcements from the 352nd Panzer Reserves, heavier cats like tigers, rumbling from the east. The wind gusted stronger, scattering the last of the shroud. Eli chambered a fresh clip, the bocage falling silent, save for the wounded's moans. How long before the artillery roared back to life? The bocage hedgerows loomed like ancient sentinels in the fading haze, their tangled roots scarred by the fresh craters of tank duels, as Sergeant Eli Harlan reloaded his Garand with numb fingers, the metallic click echoing in the uneasy quiet. The white phosphorus smoke, that desperate, stupid trick, had brought them the crossroads, but left a battlefield strewn with the twisted husks of Shermans and Panzers, their steel bellies split open like gutted fish. Oil slicked the mud, mingling with the blood of the fallen, American and German alike, turning the earth into a greasy mire that sucked at boots and wheels. Eli's breath came in ragged bursts, the acrid WP residue still coating his tongue like bitter ash, while Private Tommy Ruiz leaned against him, his leg tourniquet tight, face ashen, but eyes fierce. "We held 'em, Sarge, didn't we?" Eli scanned the thinning veil ahead, where the last wisps curled around the wreckage of the lead Panzer IV, its turret askew and smouldering. The 747th Tank Battalion survivors, 7 Shermans down from 12, idled in defensive arcs, their 50 cals sweeping the approaches, gunners from the 41st Armored Infantry wiping sweat and grime from their brows. Lieutenant Hargrove, bandaged on his arm but unbowed, climbed from his immobilized Easy-8, barking orders to rig it for towing. "Infantry, consolidate. Ammo check. Those tigers are inbound, and I ain't dying without a fight." The air hummed with tension, the distant rumble of approaching engines vibrating through the ground like an approaching storm. You could feel it in your chest, that primal dread. The war's not done with you yet. From the battalion command post, Major Thomas Reed straightened, the barn's dim light flickering across his map. "Now, a chaotic tapestry of red and blue lines marking the hard-won yards. Lieutenant Carver, his uniform rumpled from hours of frantic coordination, handed him a fresh intel sheet from the 29th Reconnaissance Platoon. "Sir, scouts confirm. 3 Tigers from the 352nd Heavy Company, supported by half-tracks. 5 minutes out, tops. The smoke's gone. Wind cleared it east toward the Via River." Reed's jaw tightened. The white phosphorus barrage from the 83rd Chemical Battalion had expended its last rounds. The 4 2-inch mortars silent now, crews reloading with standard HE under the strain. The trick had blinded the artillery spotters, scattered the Nadelwerfer crews, and even stalled the Luftwaffe's Stukas by fouling their dive paths. But Tigers, those 80D-10-meter KWK-43 guns could punch through a Sherman at a mile, and without the fog, the Bocage offered no mercy. "Get me Colonel Stanton on the line," Reed snapped into the field phone, the SCR 536's wire snaking across the hay-strewn floor. The 2nd Armored Division's commander came through crackling but clear. "Reed, you've cracked the line. Push to St. Lo or we'll lose the momentum. Artillery's retasking. 224th's 155th Silm. Long Toms incoming in 8. Reed nodded to himself, the weight of lives pressing down. The stupid idea, firing WP high to drift back on the enemy, had turned a pinned slaughter into a breakthrough, saving the 116th Infantry Regiment from evaporation. Casualties were high, Company B down to 30 effectives, the aid stations overflowing with burns from friendly drift and shrapnel wounds. But it worked. The 352nd's fire discipline had crumbled. Their observers, eyes seared and radios jammed by the burning particles, had fallen back in disorder, leaving howitzers like the Leaf H-18s firing on stale coordinates. Eli's platoon dug in along the hedgerow crest, bayonets fixed. The men sharing the last of their K-rations, crackers and cheese spread tasting like cardboard victory. Corporal Lena Voss, her radio pack heavy on her back, monitored the net. Air support diverted, P-47's bingo fuel, RTB, but typhoons from the RAF inbound from the Brits sector. Eli patted Ruiz's shoulder, the kid's morphine haze dulling the pain. "Rest easy, Tommy, we're through the worst." But doubt gnawed. He'd seen too many breakthroughs turn to meat grinders in the Bocage's embrace. The first Tiger appeared through the mist-shredded orchard, its sloped turret swiveling ponderously, the long 80 ED-meter barrel like a cannon from hell. Flanking half-tracks, Sin KFZ 251s from the 12th SS Panzer Grenadiers, deployed troops, their MG-42s chattering probes. "Open fire," Hargrove yelled from a borrowed Sherman, the 76 mm roaring first, the AP round glancing off the Tiger's frontal armor in a fountain of sparks. The behemoth returned fire, the shell slamming into the earth beside it, the shockwave flipping a jeep and hurling its driver into the hedges. Eli squeezed the Garand's trigger, the 30-06 cracking steady, picking off a grenadier who popped up with a Panzerfaust. The rockets streaked wild, detonating in a tree and showering branches like deadly rain. His men followed suit, Thompsons and Barrs barking in unison, pinning the dismounts while the tanks duelled. Another Sherman brewed up, its hull breached, flames licking high as the crew escaped, one dragging a wounded gunner. The Tigers pressed, their diesel engines bellowing, but the Bocage funneled them into kill zones. A bazooka team, Kowalski and his loader, crept forward under covering fire, the 36-inch launcher belching flame. The rocket struck the lead Tiger's track, shearing it with a screech of metal, immobilizing the beast. The commander bailed, firing his MP-40 blindly until Eli's shot dropped him. But the second Tiger's 80-ers found its mark, coring a Sherman clean through, the explosion blooming black and orange, claiming 3 lives in an instant. Screams cut the air, the human cost raw and unrelenting. Fear in the eyes of boys turned soldiers, choices made in split seconds dooming or saving. Reed's orders flooded the net. Fall back to secondary line. Lure 'em into the artillery trap. Eli's platoon withdrew by sections, dragging wounded, the Tigers lumbering after, overconfident without their spotters. The ground shook as the 224th's long toms opened up from rear positions near Isigny, 150 cm shells arcing in a rolling barrage, timed by forward observers who'd survived the smoke. The first volley bracketed the Tigers. Rounds detonating in chain blasts that flipped a half-track and peppered the lead tank's turret. The Germans halted, their commanders yelling retreats as secondary explosions ripped through ammo stores. In the aftermath, as the RAF Typhoons screamed overhead, strafing the retreating column with 20mm cannons, Eli stood amid the settling dust, the Bocage finally yielding. The 352nd's flank collapsed, their artillery useless without eyes, the stupid smoke trick echoing in after-action reports as the edge that broke the stalemate. Saint-Lô beckoned, the road to Paris inching closer. But Eli knelt by Ruiz, now stable for evacuation, the war's toll etched in every face. They'd won this scrap, turned desperation to triumph, yet the front stretched endless, sacrifices piling like the dead in the mud. Tomorrow's dawn would bring new hells, but for now the hedgerows whispered of fragile peace.